How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Hot Takes with Holmes here on Radio Free Radford. It's been a little while, but we're back from spring break, and today it's just me. My name is Blake Holmes, and again, I'm going solo as my co-host Isaiah Adair is actually currently working on classwork and was not able to make it onto the show today. But with that being said, I have a lot to cover today as there's been a very hectic time in the sports world since we last broadcast before spring break. So stick around with me as today I'm going to be talking about the recent action around the NBA, NCAA, AAF, and the NFL. But first, as always, if you like what you hear on Radio Free Radford or you want to support the station, then be sure to follow those social media pages. The Twitter is at Radio Free Raddy, Instagram and Facebook are Radio Free Radford. Once again, at Radio Free Raddy and Instagram and Facebook are Radio Free Radford. Be sure to like and follow those social media pages to be able to keep up with the great content that comes out on the station every single day. But again, Let's actually start things a little bit differently today. We usually start with NCAA basketball around this time, but today I'm going to start with the Alliance of American Football. And if you think that that's a league that maybe isn't talked about that much, it was a big past couple of weeks for them as well. So first we're going to talk about some of the results in the past week. Of course, this past week was week 5 in the AAF. So we have Orlando beating Birmingham, or excuse me, it was week 6, my apologies. Orlando was actually undefeated until this past week. They did take their first loss to the Arizona Hotshots, 22-17. The Salt Lake City Stallions beat the Memphis Express, 22-9. The San Antonio Commanders beat the Atlanta Legends, 37-6. And the Birmingham Iron take out the San Diego Fleet, 32-29. Of course, what everybody's talking about this week with the AAF, though, is Johnny Manziel. Johnny Football is back in the United States playing football for the Memphis Express. When he first came in and expressed his interest after a stint with the Montreal Alouettes in the Canadian Football League, the San Antonio Commanders actually had a chance to sign him if they wanted to, due to the fact that he did play for Texas A&M. But instead, they actually waived his right. They did not want him. They felt like they were in a good place. So Memphis Express, the 1-5 Memphis Express, are the team that signed Johnny Manziel to play for them for the rest of the season. And what does that do for them? Well, their quarterback room right now is Christian Hackenberg, Brandon Silvers, and Zach Mettenberger. So not necessarily a bad quarterback room, but it's obviously not getting the job done. Mettenberger was the best quarterback of the season so far, but he actually got hurt in the last game. Brandon Silvers coming in and replacing him. So Johnny Manziel going to this team, he's going to fight for a starting spot, and that's a big-time boost for them because, again, if they go from 1-5 and they can put together a little bit of a run in the Eastern Division, there's a chance they could sneak into the playoffs. Again, we'll have to wait and see if Johnny Football still has some Texas A&M magic in him for the Express. Talking quickly about the standings in the AAF, though, in the Eastern Division, Orlando, even after losing this past week to Arizona, still holds the top spot at 5-1. The Birmingham Iron are 4-2 right behind them. The Atlanta Legends are 2-4, one of those wins against the last place Memphis Express, 1-5. Once again, Memphis getting Johnny Manziel. In the Western Division, San Antonio has taken the lead at the top at 4-2. The San Antonio Commanders. The Arizona Hotshots are at 500, 3-3, along with the San Diego Fleet, who are also at 3-3, and the Salt Lake City Stallions are 2-4. So, briefly, that was the Alliance of American Football. It's still a good league. There's still a good contingent of talent going on throughout the rest of the season, so be sure to continue to tune in each and every weekend. But we go to probably one of the most hectic off seasons from the NFL that we have seen in a very long time. Superstars going around left and right. We're going to start off just talking briefly about some of the big-time actual free agency deals. Of course, in the quarterback market, Nick Foles was the biggest deal. 4 years, $88 million with Jacksonville to go replace Blake Bortles, who was just released, just signed a 1-year deal with the Rams. We also saw Ryan Fitzpatrick come in and sign a 2-year deal with Miami after Ryan Tannehill was traded to the Tennessee Titans. So a big-time move there, and we can expect Miami to go for a quarterback in the first round. Kyler Murray is probably not going to fall to them, so they will be looking for maybe Dwayne Haskins. Tyrod Taylor goes to the Chargers in this offseason as well, and Matt Schaub re-signs with the Atlanta Falcons. And the running back market, Le'Veon Bell, 4 years, $52.5 million for the New York Jets, as he will go to the Big Apple. I believe it was about $33 million of that is guaranteed for him. So, big pickup for New York because they go and they still are a young team. They made several big acquisitions in free agency, Le'Veon Bell being one of them. Kareem Hunt goes to Cleveland on a 1-year, $1 million deal. Of course, all the controversy with that leaked domestic violence video that came out on Kareem Hunt. He will be suspended the first 8 games because of that, but still, good pickup for Cleveland because they now have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Tevin Coleman goes to the San Francisco 49ers for 2 years, $8.5 million. Mark Ingram leaves New Orleans, signs 3 years, $15 million deal with Baltimore. So now you have Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram in the backfield for the Ravens. Adrian Peterson re-signs with Washington for 2 years. Latavius Murray goes to New Orleans to maybe try to replace Mark Ingram, or obviously kind of play the same role that maybe Alvin Kamara played for Ingram, now that Kamara steps into the main running back position. Frank Gore goes to Buffalo, who seems he's been playing for forever. He goes and plays for, he signs a 1-year deal with Buffalo. We'll go to wide receivers. Larry Fitzgerald, back to Arizona. You didn't expect, that was just obvious at this point. Golden Tate, 4 years, $37.5 million to go to the New York Giants. That's big, and the reason why, we'll talk about that in a bit. Tyrell Williams goes to Oakland for 4 years and $44.3 million. Devin Funchess goes to the Indianapolis Colts from the Carolina Panthers for 1 year and $10 million. Cole Beasley goes to Buffalo for 4 years and $29 million. The Super Bowl champion Cordero Patterson signs a 2-year deal with the Chicago Bears. And those are really the big-time major free agents that we see in the wide receivers as far as actual free agency goes. And really, Eric Weddle was another one, goes across the country from Baltimore to the Los Angeles Rams. And big-time deals left and right coming out. Justin Houston was actually released from the Kansas City Chiefs as well. But that really wasn't what made, obviously, of course, a lot of deals, a very big-time offseason for the NFL. But what really made this offseason so insane was the trades. So starting off, as we all know, Antonio Brown, the disgruntled receiver, has been wanting out of Pittsburgh for a long time, and he finally got it. The Pittsburgh Steelers trade him to the Oakland Raiders for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. Of course, AB gets his coveted Bay Area trade. He expressed interest in going to the Niners, but now he still gets to go to the Bay Area at least for 1 more year until they go to Las Vegas. So Antonio Brown also getting a big extension with Oakland. So a 3rd and 5th round pick. Who really wins this trade? Well, it's Oakland. As much as I am a Steelers fan, as much as I want to say that the Steelers won the trade, I don't think that they lost the trade per se, but I think that Oakland definitely got the bigger side of the deal, because you get an all-pro wide receiver who is competing and was usually brought up as one of the best receivers in the league, who goes and he instantly wants to sign back with you. You're going to Las Vegas with an identity. You still have Derek Carr. You still have Antonio Brown. You're rebuilding. You could potentially be a good team in the next couple of years. And Oakland wins this trade. I'm not saying it's a bad deal. Pittsburgh had dug themselves into a hole to the point they had to trade Antonio Brown. And you can always say, well, they could have gotten more for him. Maybe. But the thing is, given the hole you dug yourself into, you have to get rid of him, and that might have been the best deal that was on the table at that time. So Pittsburgh takes the 3rd and 5th round pick. They will have 10 selections in the upcoming NFL draft. But as insane as that trade was, that was actually not as surprising as the next one. Odell Beckham Jr. from the New York Giants traded to the Cleveland Browns, reuniting himself with Jarvis Landry, his former LSU teammate, and a phenomenal offensive attack with him and Baker Mayfield. And the Giants get back 2 picks. I believe it was a 1st and a 3rd round pick, and Jabril Peppers, a young safety. So not a bad pickup, but for Odell Beckham Jr., mind-blowing as you think about it. When you take a look at what Odell Beckham Jr. is able to do for that offense, now you put him in a system that has, again, Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt signing, David Njoku, Antonio Callaway. This is a fantastic offensive attack that we can expect out of Cleveland next year, and their defense was already top 10 in the NFL. So, Cleveland, it's the time to ask, who wins, or are they the favorites in the AFC North? I have to say yes, as much as it's as weird as it is to say, and as much as I'd like to say something else. No, the Cleveland needs to be, it is time to finally put some respect on this Cleveland Browns team, who is just 2 years removed from going 0-16, if you don't remember. So again, Odell Beckham makes this team an AFC North contender, especially considering, again, Pittsburgh takes a step back this offseason. I know they didn't have Le'Veon all season long last year, and they lose Antonio Brown, who Juju Smith-Schuster outshined him at times. But still, you lose Antonio Brown, you lose Le'Veon Bell, you lose some of the playmakers they did, you're going to take a step back. And Baltimore, I feel that as well as they played in the second half of the season last year, I really don't believe that they're going to be able to repeat it, because my thought process is Lamar Jackson is, I think he could be a decent quarterback. I really do. I think he could be a above average quarterback. The problem is, it's so hard to fix accuracy issues when you're going into the NFL. He is a phenomenal athlete. No one tried to deny that about Lamar Jackson, and he showed that. Why? He broke the record for most rushing attempts by a quarterback, and he only started from week 11. So a fantastic... so once again, I really believe that once film gets taken and more teams get to see Lamar Jackson in action, it's not going to be the same effect. He's just not going to be able to win as many games as he did with Baltimore. Again, he could blow those expectations out of the water and really win games with his arm this year. I'd have to see it to believe it. So Cleveland, with Baker Mayfield playing the way he did with the talent he did last year, you add Odell Beckham Jr. and Kareem Hunt after 8 games, that team should win the AFC North. There's really no reason to. And let's not even talk about Cincinnati trying to come in and take the division. They might finish last in the division, most likely. So again, huge trade for Cleveland and a big-time year, because this could be finally the Cleveland Browns year. So the teams to look out for post-free agency, Cleveland's number 1. Of course, I'm not saying they're going to win the AFC. I'm saying to keep an eye out on them. Of course, New England. You can't count out New England. Kansas City made a big move this offseason as well, signing Tyrann Mathieu for their secondary, but they did lose a lot. Steven Nelson, Justin Houston, D4, just to name a few. Kansas City always one to look out for. LA as well, the Chargers and the Rams. And again, still looking forward to a great upcoming season in the NFL. So going to NBA basketball, we're going to talk about some of the standings. And it's been a great set of action coming in here in the. We're about 15 games to go for most teams. In the Eastern Conference, we have 3 teams that have clinched playoff spots in the Milwaukee Bucks, the Toronto Raptors, and the Philadelphia 76ers at the top 3 seeds, respectively. Milwaukee, again, 52-18, Toronto, 50-21, Philadelphia at 45-25. The Indiana Pacers are at 4th at 44-27. They've got a little bit of a skid. Again, still missing Victor Oladipo, even though they've played very well without him. They're still missing him in this later part of the season at 44-27. The Boston Celtics are 43-28. They went on a little bit of a tear, but the Denver Nuggets took them out last night, so they are now the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. The Detroit Pistons at 36-34. They are a good ways behind the Celtics for the 5th seed. The Brooklyn Nets are at 7th at 36-36. The Miami Heat are at 34-36, with Orlando and Charlotte on the outside looking in. And Miami, this is the point where they got to start pulling away. They've got to start winning games to get into the playoffs right here. They've won 2 straight, but so has Orlando. So this is going to be a tight race at the bottom, and it's going to be a tight race for the 4th seed. And there still could be a lot of shaking coming in from the Eastern Conference. Now we look at the Western Conference. Compared to the 3 teams in the East, there's only 2 teams that have clinched playoff spots, one of them clinching last night. The Golden State Warriors and the Denver Nuggets are both 47-22 and have clinched playoff spots. Golden State holding the tiebreaker over the Nuggets at 2-1 right now. The Houston Rockets are 3rd at 44-26, 3.5 games back from the 1st and 2nd seed. The Portland Trailblazers are in 4th at 43-27. The San Antonio Spurs are at 42-29, the highest we've seen them this year, and they've won 9 straight games, including an impressive win over the Golden State Warriors last night. The Oklahoma City Thunder are at 42-29, taking a step back. They've lost 3 straight after being as high as the 3 seed for a large portion of the season. The Utah Jazz are in the 7th spot right now at 41-29, and the LA Clippers are at 41-30. Sacramento is the last team out, but the odds are against them right now, as they are now 6 games out of the playoffs with about 15 to go. And LA, so you're telling me there's a chance, 16.5 games back with about, in some cases, like 17 games left. So all it takes, one more win, and they are officially out of the playoff race. It's hard for me to believe, again, first time in the LeBron era since 2004. So, again, the Warriors and Nuggets still at the top of the Western Conference, the Wild Wild West, and they have both clinched playoff spots. What does that mean? Well, of course, they're still going to play hard. They both want that number one seed because I know that Denver's young and Golden State, they don't fear them. They don't. There's no reason for Golden State to be scared of the Denver Nuggets, especially in the playoff time when they know they're going to be playing to the best of their ability. But the thing that they're afraid of is playing in that altitude. I don't care if the Nuggets get the number one spot. I'm not saying they're going to run through the Western Conference. I don't think they're going to win the NBA championship this year. But you're talking about Golden State having to go through the mile-high altitude to get into the playoffs to play maybe a Milwaukee team or a Toronto team out of the other side. That's going to do damage to them. It's going to make it harder for them just because they may beat the Nuggets. They may even sweep the Nuggets this year. But as far as going into that altitude and having to play back-to-back and having to play multiple games in that altitude back-to-back and then immediately go and play in a big-time playoff series, that is going to hurt. So they're both fighting for that. They're both fighting for the number one spot right now. Denver, of course, wants that home court. The Warriors don't want the Nuggets to have a home court. So the Warriors and Nuggets still do play one more time this season, and that will decide the tiebreaker. So if Denver can beat Golden State, then they split the season series, and it will go down to, I believe it's Western Conference record at that point if they were to tie records. But if Golden State wins, they win the tiebreaker. The Nuggets would have to finish one game above them to get the number one spot. So still a lot of action coming in here from the NBA with about 16 games to go. And we're gearing up for the playoffs as we're starting to see those teams clinch. Going into MLB baseball, of course, I mean, Bryce Harper was the record holder for a 10-year, $300 million deal. It's safe to say that's not the case anymore. Mike Trout, who is known as the best player in the MLB today, signed a 12-year, $430 million deal with the Los Angeles Angels. Once again, wrap your head around that number. 12 years for $430 million. Absolute insanity. But my thought is, he's pretty much worth every penny. Mike Trout is probably the best player that we have seen, not just in the league right now, the league in this millennium. So once again, Mike Trout, $430 million, you may think that's pricey. Give him about 5 years, and then you'll really see why that could be worth a lot of money. Again, Trout breaking the record for the most money made in a single contract in professional sports history with almost $500 million with Los Angeles Angels. Of course, that's only for the Angels, so you're not even including endorsements that could come from it. Big time deal, and the Angels, now that they've got their man locked up, it could be a fun time coming up with him and Shohei Ohtani in the upcoming future. Now, we're going to talk about the thing that's going to take the most time to talk about in NCAA basketball. So starting off with Radford. Radford actually loses in the Big South Championship to Gardner-Webb, the running Bulldogs. They really did prove their worth in that game, going and winning several games on the road. And a big-time performance from DJ Laster from Gardner-Webb. Radford loses that game 76-65. Donald Hicks with 17 in the game leads the Highlanders. But of course, that does end their season. But that's nothing to scoff at by any means. Ended up 22-11, first in the Big South. They finished tied for first in the Big South. Had several big-time wins, such as Texas and Notre Dame on the road. So Radford still an impressive season to build off of for next season. They do lose Ed Polite Jr., they do lose Mauro Sala, and they do lose Caleb Tanner in the upcoming season. But there's still time for this team. Carlake Jones will be back next season. And it should still be a fun time to look out for Radford basketball. But with that being said, Selection Sunday did happen, and we now know the bracket of the NCAA tournament. So what I'm going to do today is again, this is why I said it's going to take the most time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go on here on the air and fill out a bracket, and explain my bracket and my predictions. So starting it off, going into the Eastern region, Duke was the number one seed, and Duke really should be considered one of the favorites of the tournament. I do have them beating the 16 seed. We don't know who that's going to be until after the first four, but Duke moves on from the first round. VCU and UCF. VCU is a team that they play a very team-oriented basketball, but UCF, there's no reason they shouldn't win the rebounding edge. They do have Taco Fall as an example, but I do like UCF to beat VCU in the first round and go into the round of 32. Mississippi State and Liberty. Now here is where it gets interesting because The matchups that I always had the most trouble with when picking brackets is the 5v12 matchup, because it is statistically proven that the 12 seed is the team that typically makes the biggest upset, or usually makes the most common upset. So here, I'm going with the 12. Liberty. The Liberty Flames knock off the Mississippi State Bulldogs in the first round. Again, I think that Mississippi State, going into the SEC, they're not a bad team. They're not a great team, per se, especially not when it came towards the top of the SEC standards. But Liberty, coming out of the Sun Belt this year, I'm taking them to beat Mississippi State. They won't last long, though. Virginia Tech and St. Louis. I have Tech taking it into the next round after losing in the first round to, I believe it was Alabama last season. They come back as a 4 seed and jump out of the first round against St. Louis, even though that could be an upset alert as well. Maryland and either Belmont and Temple, again, first 4. We'll have to see when that goes. I still have Maryland winning that game. Maryland is still a pretty good Big Ten team. Big Ten is, in my opinion, the second best conference in the NCAA when it came to the quality of the teams. Maryland coming out of the Big Ten, they will beat Belmont or Temple, even though I think Belmont's a very underrated team as well. LSU and Yale. LSU gets the win over Yale, even though the last time Yale was in the tournament, they did knock off Baylor in the first round. Torian Prince with a press conference of the ages after that game. But LSU, Tremont Waters, they're going to beat Yale. They should, or I'm not going to say they should beat Yale and handle their business to meet Maryland in the second round. Louisville and Minnesota. I think Louisville's a very underrated team coming out of the ACC. They really play tough with some teams. Louisville actually had, I believe it was like an 18-point lead against UNC, and they let it go to waste towards the end of the game. So Louisville beats Minnesota here, and they go to the next round. Michigan State and Bradley. I'm going with Michigan State. Tom Izzo, you're just talking about Cassius Winston, people like that. This could still be a good team. I don't think they go way far, but I think they could potentially turn some heads. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do it up until the Final Four for each region. So going on in my bracket, I have Duke and UCF in the round of 32. Duke wins this game. Again, I don't think Duke is really going to be challenged until about the Elite 8, or Sweet 16 Elite 8 in that area. So Duke wins this game big against UCF as well, and they move on. Liberty and Virginia Tech, the upset versus the team that should win. 2 local teams as well. I'm going Virginia Tech. I think that they get the win over Liberty at this point. Again, Liberty, I'm not 100% confident in my pick for them against over Mississippi State, but I think that could be likely. So I like Virginia Tech to beat Liberty in that matchup. LSU beats Maryland. Again, I like the star power that LSU has in Tremont Waters, and I think that they get the win over Maryland in the round of 32. Louisville and Michigan State. I like Louisville. I really do. I like this Louisville team. I think they're underrated, and I think they beat Michigan State. They have, even though Tom Izzo has the experience, I think Louisville gets a gritty win in the round of 32 to go on to the Elite, to the Sweet 16. Duke and Virginia Tech, again in the Sweet 16. Duke gets the win. They beat Virginia Tech in a close game. Remember, Virginia Tech actually beat Duke earlier in the season at Castle Coliseum. Remember, though, that was without Zion Williamson and at the home court. So I like Duke to get revenge on Tech. Even though I still think it's going to be closer than a lot of people may give it credit, Duke wins this game. And then finally, Louisville, one of the Cinderellas in the Elite 8 at a number 7 seed, does get knocked out by LSU. They go into the Elite 8. Duke and LSU, Duke gets the win. Duke goes to the Final Four. LSU, you talk about star power. Again, I talked about how I like LSU star power. Duke has more. R.J. Barrett, Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, Trey Jones. There's a lot of great players on that Duke team. They get the win over the Tigers to go and represent the Final Four, or represent the Eastern region in the Final Four. We're going to move on to the West region, go across the country. And Gonzaga in the first round. Again, we won't know who. I believe Prairie View is one of the 16 seeds, but it doesn't really matter because Gonzaga wins in the first round. Again, it's not to say that it's not possible for a 16 seed to win. I mean, we saw it last year in UMBC beating Virginia, one of the greatest sports upsets in sports history. But I think Gonzaga gets a win here. I think they're an underrated team coming out of the West Coast Conference. So Gonzaga gets the win, goes to the round of 32. Syracuse and Butler. I like Syracuse. I really do. Or excuse me, Syracuse and Baylor. Syracuse gets the win here. Jim Boeheim gets his team into the round of 32. And you should know, Syracuse, whenever they're seated at an 8 or below, then they are usually seen as a threat to go deep as a Cinderella. I like them to go into the next round against Baylor. Marquette and Murray State. This is going to be a ton of fireworks and a marquee matchup. You may think it's weird that a 5v12 is a marquee matchup. I don't. Murray State and Marquette. Murray State, John Morant, the probable second pick in the NBA draft is coming up this season coming up. And Marquette, Marcus Howard, who at one point was seen as a Wooden Award finalist, or potentially. So Marquette and Murray State, it's going to be a great matchup. I like Murray State. I do. I like the 12 seed again against 5 seed. Spoiler alert, I don't have all of the 12 seeds advancing, but Murray State, John Morant, he's trying to go out and prove to the NBA scouts, hey, I can play. Here is why I'm the number 2 pick in the NBA draft. I think they get a win over Marquette because of that. Florida State and Vermont. Florida State gets this win. I think Florida State's also a very underrated team after being beaten by Duke in the ACC Championship. They're a very big team. They're a very experienced team, and they play deep. They play 10 to 12 guys every single night. So I like Florida State to beat Vermont, the Catamounts, in the first round. Buffalo and either Arizona State or St. John's. I like Buffalo. I think Buffalo is another team that, as a 6 seed, they were potentially going to be a tougher team than what a lot of people are giving them credit for, actually defeating West Virginia earlier in the season. So Buffalo gets the win. They go to the round of 32, and they will face the winner of Texas Tech and Northern Kentucky. And spoiler alert, I have Texas Tech. Again, Texas Tech. The Big 12 as a whole seemed to be down this year. Kansas wasn't necessarily the same that we've seen them at. Iowa State won the entire conference, which, again, I think Iowa State's a very underrated team. Kansas State's another one who actually finished number 1 in regular season conference. This is the first time we haven't seen West Virginia in the tournament in a little while. But Texas Tech beats Northern Kentucky. They go into the next round. Nevada and Florida. I've said it all season long. I think Nevada is a very good basketball team. I think they're a very underrated basketball team. They beat Florida, even though Florida, if they can get past the first round, they are very capable of making a run. Michigan and Montana. Michigan gets the win. I don't really need to talk about that. I think that Michigan wins this game pretty handily. I think they're they seem to be an overrated team at times, but when it comes to this matchup, I like Michigan to win by a good bit. So, going back to the top of the Western, we have Gonzaga and Syracuse. As much as I said that I think Syracuse could make a run, I like Gonzaga again to win this game. They go into the Elite Eight, or the Sweet 16 after a win against the Syracuse Orange. Murray State and Florida State. I like Florida State to finally beat Murray State. I just don't think that Murray State has the size to compete with the Seminoles in the round of 32. Texas Tech knocks off Buffalo, even though that could be a rubber match as well. I think that Buffalo has the potential to maybe even go to the Elite Eight, potentially Final Four. The Nevada Wolfpack and the Michigan Wolverines, 2 Battle of Wolves, and I like Michigan, the Wolverines, to beat the Wolfpack in the round of 32. We go to the Sweet 16, Gonzaga and Florida State. I like Gonzaga again. Gonzaga is a team that, again, they may seem overrated at times because they do play in the Western Conference or in the West Coast Conference. But again, I like Gonzaga to beat Florida State in a hard-fought Elite Eight matchup. Sweet 16 matchup. The Texas Tech Red Raiders and the Michigan Wolverines. I like Michigan to win this game as well. Texas Tech, again, they haven't necessarily played the same type of team. They've played Kansas, of course, but Michigan coming out of the Big Ten, again, a very tough conference. I like them to go into the Elite Eight at this point. And Gonzaga and Michigan, give me the upset. Give me the Wolverines to go into the Final Four to face the Duke Blue Devils in what should be a high-profile matchup. We go to, I believe that is the South region. Yes, I'll move the camera right here. Yes. So in the South region, we do have Virginia and Gardner-Webb in the first round. Like I said, I think UVA is going to remember what happened last year. I think they do, and I think that they beat the Running Bulldogs pretty handily in the first round. They move on to the second round. Ole Miss and Oklahoma are the next team. I like Ole Miss. I really like this Ole Miss team. Their coach is winning SEC Coach of the Year. And I think that the Rebels could be in for a decent playoff, or could have been in for a decent tournament run if they didn't meet Virginia in the next round. Wisconsin and Oregon, again, I promise this wasn't intentional, but I like this Oregon team. I think Wisconsin's a little bit overrated. I do. And I like Oregon coming out of the Pac-12. One of the only teams in the Pac-12 really in this tournament, one of the few, I should say. They beat Wisconsin to go into the next round. Kansas State and UC Irvine. I believe it's UC Irvine's first NCAA tournament bid in their school history, so congratulations to them. But Kansas State beats them in the first round. The Wildcats are a they finished on top of the Big 12 in the regular season for a reason. Villanova and St. Mary's. This is a game that I think St. Mary's could really pull this out, but I'm going with the safe bet. I'm going Villanova. Really an underachieving season for the most part, but I think that Nova finds a way to win against St. Mary's. Purdue and Old Dominion. Old Dominion, for the first time, I believe it's like 2011 or 2013, something like that, they were in the NCAA tournament. I like Purdue. I think that Purdue, again, is an underrated team as well. Coming out of the Big Ten, they beat Old Dominion to face Villanova in the next round. Cincinnati and Iowa. Cincinnati coming out of the American, they were the number 2 seed in the American to Houston. Fighting them really hard in the American Championship, but I like Cincinnati to beat Iowa, even though Iowa is another team to keep an eye out for. And Tennessee against Colgate. Colgate, I'm not quite sure how many times they've made the tournament, but I've seen so many jokes. Tennessee's playing a toothpaste brand in the first round. If they handle their business, they should win this game. They'll go into the round of 32. Going back to the top, we have Virginia and Ole Miss. Virginia should win this game. Their defense is just too good, and Tony Bennett has the experience against Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss could be a pretty good team in the upcoming next couple of years, but Virginia gets this win. They go into the Elite or the Sweet 16. The Kansas State Wildcats and the Oregon Ducks. Kansas State wins this game as well. Top of the Big South. I keep saying Big South. The Big 12. They beat Oregon in this game, meeting Virginia. The Villanova Wildcats and the Purdue Boilermakers. Purdue gets this win. I know that Villanova and Jay Wright, they have the experience, but they just don't have the roster, I think, to go and make the same run that they did last season. So Purdue gets this win. They go into the Sweet 16. And Cincinnati and Tennessee. I think that Tennessee is a very big, you can call me biased if you want. I think Tennessee, after that loss to Auburn in the SEC Championship, they are a very dangerous team because they're going to keep that in mind, and they're going to be able to make a run in the NCAA tournament. They beat Cincinnati and move on to the Sweet 16. Virginia and Kansas State. UVA gets the win. They go into the Elite Eight after, again, the harsh first round exit last year. We still see Kyle Guy. We still see Ty Jerome are the two main playmakers for that UVA team, and they're going to be able to get into the Elite Eight because of that. And Tennessee beats Purdue. Tennessee, Admiral Schofield, Grant Williams, the back-to-back SEC Player of the Year, Jordan Bone. They have a great roster, and Rick Barnes has been in a similar situation to this before. I think they have the experience edge over Purdue when they get into the Elite Eight. And again, give me the upset. I like Tennessee to beat Virginia. I do. I think that Grant Williams does well on the lower post. Again, it's going to be a hard-fought game, but both teams play great defense, and both teams have an experienced head coach. So I do like that. I do like the edge that Tennessee has, especially when it comes to just straight-up playmakers, the guys who are going to go get you a bucket. And in that sense, I like Tennessee to go into the Final Four at that point. And finally, going into the Midwest region, we have North Carolina and Iona. Iona, known for the school that Jim Valvano started at. UNC gets this win, though. UNC has played like a number 2 team in the nation at times this year, even played like a number 1 team in the nation at times this year. They beat Iona to go into the next round. Utah State and Washington. Utah State is another team that I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about them, the Aggies, but I do know that I like Washington to win this game because of that. Maybe you can call me ignorant in that sense, but I didn't have either one of them going past the round of 32 anyways. I'm going to take the safe bet, the team that I know more about in Washington. Auburn and New Mexico State. I like this Auburn team. I will say that right now. I think they are well equipped to go and make a run. The way they shot against Tennessee in the SEC Championship, if they can repeat that, oh my God, they're going to be a tough out. Kansas and Northeastern. Kansas gets this win. Kansas, again, not the same Kansas team that we're used to seeing from Bill Self, but they do have enough to beat Northeastern in the first round. Iowa State and Ohio State. I like this Iowa State team as well. Winning the Big 12 championship. Again, Big 12 was kind of down as a whole this year, but Iowa State gets past the first round against Ohio State. Houston and Georgia State. Georgia State, the last time they were in the tournament, if I'm not mistaken, they knocked off, I believe it was Baylor, again in the first round. R.J. Hunter hitting a huge 3, and I remember I predicted that. I actually called Georgia State into at least, I believe it was the Sweet 16, and they did make it to the round of 32. So, but Houston gets this win. Houston won the American for a reason. They go and they will meet the Cyclones in the second round. Wofford and Seton Hall. I think Wofford's an underrated team as well. They beat Seton Hall here, even though Seton Hall, they were a team that beat Kentucky earlier on this season. Kentucky and Abilene Christian. Kentucky wins this game. As much as I don't like Kentucky, they are a very good team. They are a young team, and they have a lot to prove when it comes to this postseason. They're going to beat and get into the next round. So we go to the second round, North Carolina and Washington. North Carolina wins this game. I think UNC will probably at least make it to the Elite Eight, probably farther, but they beat Washington here in the round of 32. Auburn and Kansas, again, I like this Auburn team. They beat the Kansas Jayhawks right here as the number 5 seed. Again, if they can shoot like the way they did in the ACC Championship, they can beat just about anybody in the country. And the way they play defense, I like this Auburn team. Bruce Pearl's doing a great job in Auburn. They beat the Kansas Jayhawks. Iowa State and Houston, give me another upset. I like the Cyclones to beat the Cougars. I know the Cyclones have played higher quality opponents throughout the season, and I think that this is an underrated team. They beat the Cougars in the round of 32. Wofford and Kentucky. Kentucky wins this game. Again, I like Wofford. I like their chances, but I like Kentucky to win this game going into the Sweet 16. North Carolina and Auburn. Auburn gets the win here. As much as I'm going to receive some backlash here, North Carolina is a team that they match up very well. They're a very similar team. North Carolina and Auburn are both very streaky basketball teams. And what I mean by that is if they can shoot the way they can, nobody in the nation is going to stop them. The problem is they have to face each other. I like the upset. Again, it's March Madness for a reason. I'm picking upsets at times. You have a problem with it. There's never been a perfect bracket in NCAA history, so it's always worth taking a chance. So Auburn beats North Carolina in the Sweet 16. Iowa State and Kentucky. This is where the Cyclones run comes to an end. John Calipari just has too much experience in the tournament to really make up for Iowa State, and Kentucky shouldn't even win this game by not a lot. So it should be a blowout in Kentucky's favor, but it could be closer. Kentucky gets the win going into the Elite Eight. Auburn and Kentucky. You may think I was going with Auburn. This is where it ends. Kentucky showing that they lost it. This is the first time they haven't been in the SEC championship for like 4 or 5 years. So they're out with something to prove. They've got some rest now. They're going to beat this Auburn team who is aghast from winning. At this point, would have won about, I believe it's 3 straight games, including the SEC tournament. Kentucky goes to the Final Four. And so here we are, ladies and gentlemen, into the Final Four that will be taking place at Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is what you watch college basketball for. This is the happiest time of the year for a sports fan. You go into the Final Four on the left side of the bracket. It will be Duke and Michigan. I like Duke. I think Duke wins this game and gets into the national championship with an impressive win. I think it's actually going to be a statement win over the Michigan Wolverines. Again, I think they may be a little bit overrated at times, but I think they're good enough, and the way they got seeded, they're good enough to get into the Final Four. And on the other side, the 4th time this season, Tennessee and Kentucky. Tennessee currently holds the edge at 2-1 on the season. Both teams won on their home floors, and Tennessee beat Kentucky in the SEC playoffs. As much as I think this could be just a grudge match, I think this is going to be a slugfest. Haymakers being thrown left and right. I like Tennessee to get into the national championship over Kentucky. You call me biased, but again, they're not making it past there. Duke wins the national championship with a final score of 86-81. This is a fantastic Duke team. We've seen them struggle at times, but of course, we haven't seen them that a ton at full strength. With Zion Williamson playing at the level he has been, and with the team playing like they can, this team should win. There's really no reason for this team to not win the national championship unless you just want to say that it's because of March Madness. And again, that's possible. They are still freshmen. They are still having to play a tough slate and a very tough schedule coming up. But there is no reason that Duke should not be considered the favorites, at least, to win this national championship. And again, your brackets may look different. Be sure to let me know if you want. Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments of our YouTube video whenever this broadcast is uploaded. But let me know what your brackets say. At this point, I have Duke beating Tennessee in the national championship, even though I think UVA could very well get into the national championship as well, even win the entire thing. So that is my bracket. That is what I have going for March Madness coming up. Games will begin this Thursday, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. My personal favorite looking out for in the first round is Murray State Marquette. Like I said, that's going to be a high-profile matchup between 2 potential NBA draft prospects and great college basketball players, John Morant and Marcus Howard. So again, tune in. If you're a sports fan, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Forget Christmas. It's March, baby. Well, that is going to do it here on Hot Takes with Holmes here from Radio Free Radford. If you like what you heard today, then be sure to like our Facebook page where we'll update all that goes on here on Hot Takes with Holmes. We're also on YouTube where all of our broadcasts are uploaded to, so you can find us at Hot Takes with Holmes on both of the sites. So if you missed something in this past broadcast or you want to go back and listen to some of the older broadcasts, you can do that. They're on our YouTube channel. Again, if you like what you hear in Radio Free Radford, then follow their social media pages. Their Twitter's at Radio Free Ratty. Instagram and Facebook are both Radio Free Radford. That's Radio Free Ratty, Instagram and Facebook, Radio Free Radford. Again, like and follow those social media pages to be able to keep up with the great content that comes out every single day and to be able to support the station. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me. My name is Blake Holmes, and we'll see you next week here on Radio Free Radford.